He's my mate. Alien warrior woman shielded human man after he revealed their leaders. Crime Saren had faced creatures that could tear metal apart with their bare limbs. She had stood in the center of plasma storms and walked away without a mark. She had ended wars with her presence alone. Yet now, standing inside the quiet medical chamber of the Coalition ship, her hands trembled slightly at her sides. The reason stood in front of her. Elia's ward looked ordinary by every galactic standard. He was smaller than most species in the room, softer, lacking natural armor, claws, or energy fields. His brown hair was unremarkable. His eyes, however, were steady. Not fearless, not foolish, just steady as if he had already accepted what was coming. Saren's species was known across the stars for one truth above all others. Their touch was deadly. Their skin carried bioenergy that surged on contact, overwhelming nervous systems and shutting down organs in moments. Among her people, touch was not casual. It was sacred. It was dangerous. It was a test. The trial of contact was never offered lightly. It was used to judge worth, resolve bonds, or end uncertainty. No non-Kael'thran had ever survived it. Most did not last more than a few seconds. Elias had been told all of this. He still stood there. Coalition medics watched from behind transparent barriers, their faces tight with worry. Alien officers whispered to one another in sharp, clicking tones. Some looked curious. Others looked bored, already certain of the outcome. Saren stepped closer. Each movement was controlled, precise, trained over decades of combat and ritual. She could feel the energy beneath her skin responding, ready to surge the moment contact was made. "This is not required," one of the medics said, voice shaking. "Human physiology is not." Elias raised one hand slightly, stopping him. He didn't take his eyes off Saren. "I understand," Elias said calmly. "I choose this." Saren searched his face for hesitation. She found none. What she did find unsettled her more than fear ever could: acceptance. In her culture, only those prepared to die stood like that. She spoke in her own language first, a ritual phrase older than recorded history, then translated it into common so all could understand. "If you survive my touch," Saren said, her voice low and steady, "you are worthy. If you do not, your courage will still be honored." The room went silent. Elias nodded once. "Then let's begin." Saren lifted her hand. She hesitated. This was not weakness, it was calculation. She had controlled her energy output 1,000 times in battle, adjusting force to break armor without killing. But the trial was different. To weaken it would be an insult. To hold back would make the result meaningless. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her palm against Elias' forearm. The energy surged instantly. Invisible to the eye but devastating in effect, the biocurrent flooded Elias' nervous system, designed to overload, to shut down pain receptors, muscles, and consciousness all at once. Alien monitors spiked wildly. Warnings flashed across screens. Elias gasped. His body stiffened, muscles locking as if struck by lightning. His knees buckled, but he did not fall. His teeth clenched. A sharp sound escaped his throat, but it was not a scream. Saren expected him to collapse. He didn't. Seconds passed. To the observers, it felt unreal. No one had ever lasted this long. Medics prepared emergency sedatives, though everyone knew they would arrive too late if his system failed. Inside Elias, pain burned like fire through every nerve. His vision blurred. His heart raced, then threatened to stumble. Every instinct screamed at him to pull away. But Elias had lived his life learning when pain mattered, and when it did not. He had grown up on a world with storms that flattened cities. He had worked jobs that broke bodies if people weren't careful. He had learned, like all humans did in one way or another, that discomfort was not the same as death. Pain was information. His body reacted not by shutting down, but by adjusting. Adrenaline surged. Neural pathways rerouted. Muscles that had locked began to tremble, then slowly loosened. Saren felt it. The energy feedback changed. Instead of resistance and collapse, there was absorption. The current didn't rebound the way it should have. It didn't burn out the system it touched. It spread, diffused, softened. Her eyes widened slightly. This was impossible. She increased the output carefully, instinctively, not to harm, but to confirm what she was feeling. Elias cried out, breath shaking, but he stayed upright. His free hand clenched into a fist, nails biting into his palm. Sweat ran down his face. His eyes squeezed shut for a moment, then opened again. He met her gaze, still steady. Around them, the room erupted in noise. Scientists shouted readings. Officers argued. Protocols were forgotten. No one had prepared for this outcome because no one had believed it could happen. Saren lowered the energy flow at last and pulled her hand away. Elias collapsed to one knee, gasping for air but conscious. Medics rushed forward, scanning him, speaking urgently. His vitals were unstable but holding. Every system strained but functioning. Alive. Saren stood frozen, staring at her own hand as if it no longer belonged to her. She had felt many things through touch before: destruction, domination, finality. She had never felt synchronization. Elias looked up at her from the floor, breathing hard. His voice was rough, but there was a faint, tired smile on his face. "Guess," he said between breaths, "I passed." No one laughed, because no one could explain what they had just seen. Saren knelt in front of him, ignoring the stunned looks of her own people. This was not part of the ritual. This was instinct. "You should not be alive," she said quietly, not as an insult, but as a statement of fact. Elias shrugged weakly. "People say that a lot." She studied him with new eyes, not as something fragile, not as something to be protected or dismissed, but as something unknown. Dangerous in a way no weapon could be. Across the room, data streamed across screens, rewriting assumptions older than the coalition itself. Humans were not built to withstand such forces. They had learned to. And for the first time in her long life, Saren wondered what else this small, stubborn species had endured in silence, long before the stars ever noticed them. Elia's ward woke slowly, like someone swimming up from deep water. Sounds came first: soft beeps, low voices. The steady hum of a ship moving through space. His body felt heavy, sore in a way that reached deeper than muscle or bone. Every nerve seemed tired, as if it had worked too hard and had not yet recovered. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was white and curved, marked with faint lights that pulsed in calm patterns. A medical bay. He tried to move and stopped when his body protested. He let out a slow breath and stayed still. "You are awake." The voice was calm, controlled, and unmistakably Saren's. Elias turned his head slightly. She stood a short distance away, arms folded behind her back in the formal stance of her people. Her armor was gone. Without it, she looked less like a weapon and more like a person, though the power beneath her skin was still visible in the faint glow along her veins. "Still breathing," Elias said quietly. "That's usually a good sign." For a moment, Saren did not respond. She was watching him with an intensity that made him feel like he was still part of the test. "You should not have survived," she said at last. Elias gave a small smile. "You already said that." "Yes," she replied, "and it remains true." She stepped closer, stopping beside the medical bed. The monitors reflected in her eyes, streams of data scrolling faster than most species could read. "Your body did not resist the energy," she continued. "It adapted. Our science cannot explain it." Elias closed his eyes briefly. "Human bodies don't always do what science expects." That answer, simple as it was, seemed to disturb her more than any complex explanation could have. Across the bay, other beings watched quietly. Coalition officers, scientists, medics from half a dozen species. None of them spoke. All of them waited. The trial of contact had ended, but its effects had only begun. News spread through the ship and beyond with frightening speed. Data logs were copied, encrypted, reviewed, and reviewed again. The same conclusion appeared every time, no matter how many experts examined it. The human had survived, not through armor, not through technology, through himself. By the time Elias was strong enough to stand, the Coalition Council had already issued orders. Saren was summoned. Elias was requested, not ordered, to attend. The council chamber was vast, built to accommodate species of many sizes. Floating platforms, reinforced floors, adjustable atmospheres. Elias stood at the center with Saren beside him. Compared to the beings around them, he looked small. He did not feel small. A senior counselor spoke, its voice echoing through the chamber. "Human Elias Ward, do you understand why you are here?" Elias nodded. "Because I didn't die when I was supposed to." A ripple of reaction moved through the chamber. Some found the statement offensive. Others found it honest. Saren spoke next, her tone firm. "The trial was conducted according to tradition. No rules were broken." "That is not in question," the counselor replied. "What is in question is what this means." Images appeared in the air. Human history, harsh planets, early space stations, dangerous jobs performed without complaint, medical records showing survival rates that made other species recoil. A scientist addressed the council. "Humans evolved under constant stress. Disease, environmental danger, internal conflict. Their nervous systems do not shut down easily. Pain does not immediately signal failure. Elias listened quietly. It felt strange hearing his species described like that, stripped of pride. Reduced to patterns and data, another voice joined in. They should have broken long before reaching the stars. Saren turned her head slightly toward Elias. They did not. The council fell silent. Then came the question Elias had been expecting. Human, the counselor said, why did you accept the trial? Elias thought for a moment before answering. He did not want to sound brave. He did not want to sound defiant. Because, he said simply, walking away would have meant agreeing that I was less. I didn't want that to be true. Some species found the answer confusing. Others understood it too well. After the session ended, Elias returned to the quieter sections of the ship. His body healed faster than the medics expected. Not because he was special, but because his body refused to stop working. Saren walked with him often after that, always at a careful distance. Her people watched her with concern. Touch between them was now forbidden by emergency order. Not because Elias was fragile, but because no one knew what would happen next. One cycle, as the ship drifted between stars, Saren stopped in an empty observation corridor. Beyond the transparent wall, space stretched endlessly, calm and cold. You changed many things, she said. Elias leaned against the railing. Wasn't the plan. Plans do not matter, she replied. Results do. She hesitated, then did something unexpected. She lowered her hand, palm open, not touching him. Our leaders believe humans are dangerous, she said. Not because you are violent, but because you endure. Elias looked at her hand, glowing faintly with restrained power. Endurance isn't the same as aggression. In the galaxy, Saren said quietly, it often becomes more powerful. Word spread beyond the coalition. Other species demanded proof. Some demanded restrictions. A few demanded answers that could not be given. So the coalition proposed a second demonstration, not a trial. A choice. In a controlled environment, Saren would attempt contact again, this time adjusting her energy in response to Elias' body instead of overpowering it. No ritual, no challenge, only observation. Elias was given time to decide. He did not take long. The chamber was smaller this time, fewer observers, more safeguards. Saren stood facing him, her expression unreadable. This is not required, she said, echoing words once spoken to him. Elias nodded. I know. She extended her hand slowly. He did the same. Their fingers met. The energy flowed, softer than before, testing instead of striking. Elias felt the familiar burn, but it did not overwhelm him. He breathed through it. His body adjusted. Saren felt something change. The energy did not dominate or destroy. It balanced, responded. Like two forces finding the same rhythm, gasps filled the chamber. For the first time in recorded history, a Kael'thran touch did not mean harm. Saren pulled her hand back, her breath unsteady. This should not be possible. Elias smiled, tired but real. We're good at surviving things that shouldn't be possible. The final reports were sent across the galaxy. Humans were reclassified, no longer fragile, no longer underestimated. They were named something new, adaptive endurance species. On the observation deck later, Saren stood beside Elias, no barrier between them now, not touching, not yet, but closer than before. In my culture, she said, worth is proven by what one can withstand. Elias looked out at the stars. Then I guess we understand each other. Below them, a galaxy shifted its view of humanity, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as the species that endured, adapted, and stood where no one expected them to survive. And for the first time, the stars looked back at humans with something close to respect. The galaxy did not change its mind quickly. Even after the reports were verified, repeated, and shared across dozens of systems, doubt remained. Some species accepted the new classification of humans with caution. Others rejected it outright. A few feared it. Fear spread faster than respect ever could. On a distant coalition station, far from the calm corridors of the ship Elias now called home, a meeting was taking place without human representatives present. Screens showed footage of Elias enduring the trial, of Saren adjusting her energy, of impossible data repeating the same conclusion. One voice cut through the discussion, cold and sharp. If humans can endure what was meant to kill, then they will eventually challenge what was meant to rule. That idea took root. Not all threats came with weapons. Back aboard the coalition ship, Elias felt the shift before anyone told him. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Security protocols quietly changed. Access permissions were reviewed again and again. Saren noticed it too. "They are afraid," she said one cycle as they walked through the engineering deck. Elias adjusted a loose panel, hands steady. "Fear's familiar." "To us," she replied, "fear often leads to force." That warning proved true sooner than either of them expected. The emergency alarm sounded without warning. Not a drill, not a test. A sharp, repeating tone that echoed through the ship. Elias looked up from his work. "That's not normal." Saren was already moving, posture shifting from calm to combat-ready. "We are being boarded." The attackers were not pirates or rogue factions. Their ships carried coalition codes, official markings, authority. They claimed it was an inspection. No one believed that. Armed units entered the ship, spreading quickly, moving with precision. Their orders were clear: secure the Kael'thran warrior, detain the human. "Detain," Elias repeated when the message reached them. "That's new." "They wish to control what they do not understand," Saren said, "and remove what challenges their certainty." They did not run. Running would have confirmed every fear. When the boarding unit reached the central corridor, they found Elias standing beside Saren, unarmed, calm. The commander of the unit spoke through an external translator. "Human Elias Ward, you are to come with us for further evaluation." Elias tilted his head slightly. "Am I under arrest?" "You are under authority," the commander replied. Saren's energy flared instinctively, the glow along her skin brightening. "You will not take him." Weapons were raised, targeting systems locked. Elias lifted one hand slowly, placing it in front of Saren. "Wait," she looked at him, confused. "They are a threat." "I know," he said quietly, "but let me try something first." He stepped forward, the commander stiffened. "Do not approach." Elias stopped at a safe distance, hands visible. "You're scared," he said, his voice even. "I get that, but taking me won't fix what you're worried about." "You represent an unknown risk," the commander said. "Your species classification was in error." Elias nodded. "We're used to being misclassified." A murmur spread among the soldiers. Humans were not supposed to speak like this, not calm, not grounded. "You think endurance makes us dangerous," Elias continued. "But endurance is how we survive bad choices, like this one." Saren watched closely. This was not a trial of strength. This was something else. The commander hesitated, orders conflicted with instinct. Data conflicted with fear. Then one soldier moved too quickly. The sound of a weapon discharging echoed through the corridor. Saren reacted instantly, stepping in front of Elias. Energy surged outward, not lethal, but powerful enough to knock the attackers back. Systems flickered, armor strained. The corridor fell silent. Elias stood behind her, unharmed. "You see," Elias said softly, "force just proves our point." Reinforcements arrived moments later, loyal coalition forces responding to the breach. The boarding unit was disarmed and detained. No lives were lost, but the damage was done. The incident spread across the galaxy faster than any report ever had. Humans were not passive, humans were not weak, and when threatened, they did not break. In the aftermath, Elias was summoned again. This time, the council chamber was full. No empty seats, no hidden observers. Saren stood beside him, not as a warrior on trial, but as a witness. The counselor who spoke now sounded different, less certain. "Human Elias Ward." Events have escalated beyond expectation. Elias met the gaze of beings who once saw him as fragile. That happens when fear replaces understanding. "What do humans want?" another voice asked. The question surprised many. No species had asked it seriously before. Elias thought carefully. "We want the same thing most of you do: safety, choice, the chance to stand without being crushed for existing." Silence followed. Then Saren spoke, her voice steady and clear. "My people believed worth came from what we could destroy. Humans have shown us it can also come from what one can endure without becoming cruel." That statement carried weight far beyond the chamber. The council withdrew for deliberation. Hours passed. Elias waited, sitting quietly, feeling the familiar ache in his body that reminded him he was human, tired but still standing. When the council returned, their decision was unanimous. Humans would no longer be subjects of study. They would be partners. Restrictions were lifted. Joint programs were proposed, not to test humans but to learn from them. Not everyone was pleased. Change never satisfied everyone, but it was enough. Later, on the observation deck, Elias and Saren stood side by side again. The stars looked the same as always, distant and cold, yet somehow less hostile. "You could have been taken," Saren said quietly. "You chose to stand instead." Elias shrugged. Standing kind of our thing. She looked at him, then slowly extended her hand. This time there were no alarms, no observers, no fear. Elias reached out and took it. The energy was there, gentle, controlled. His body adjusted without strain. Her energy responded without harm. Balance. In that moment, it was not about trials or councils or classifications. It was about two beings proving that survival did not have to mean domination. Across the galaxy, the story of humanity changed again. Not because of strength alone, not because of technology, but because when the universe tested them, humans did what they had always done. They endured, and they invited others to stand with them. Change did not arrive as peace. After the Council's decision, the galaxy did not suddenly trust humans. Agreements were signed, yes, but suspicion remained. Borders stayed guarded. Messages were carefully worded. Cooperation existed, but it was fragile like glass stretched too thin. Elias felt it everywhere he went. On stations, conversations slowed when humans passed. On shared ships, humans were watched more closely than others, not with hate but with uncertainty. Endurance made people uneasy. A species that did not break easily could not be predicted easily either. Saren understood this better than most. Fear does not disappear, she said as they walked through a neutral trade hub. It only changes shape. Elias nodded. Back home, we learned that lesson a long time ago. The Coalition had asked Elias to stay on as a liaison, not a soldier, not a symbol, a voice, someone who could speak calmly when others reacted with force. He accepted, knowing it would be harder than any trial. Words were heavier than pain. Their next assignment took them to a border system near unstable space. A mining colony had gone silent. The species living there were not warriors, they were traders and builders. The signal that finally reached the Coalition was short and frightened. Something had gone wrong. The Coalition ship arrived to find the station damaged but not destroyed. Power flickered, docking lights failed, no weapons fire detected. Strange, Saren said as they prepared to board. An attack without aggression. Elias checked the emergency gear. That's usually worse. Inside the station, the air felt heavy. Gravity fluctuated slightly, enough to make movement uncomfortable. The corridors were marked with signs of panic. Dropped tools, open doors, scratches along the walls. They found survivors in the central habitat ring, exhausted, shaken. One of the station leaders stepped forward, voice unsteady. It's not an enemy fleet, they said. It's the station itself. The explanation came slowly. A deep space anomaly had passed too close. It disrupted systems, caused energy surges, warped gravity fields. Species with sensitive nervous systems collapsed almost immediately. Many were still unconscious. Some were worse. Human engineers had been working on the station when it happened. They're still awake, the leader said. They're holding things together, but they're hurting, a lot. Elias felt his chest tighten. The humans were found near the core systems, manually stabilizing power flows that automation could no longer manage. Their faces were pale. Their hands shook. Sweat soaked through their clothes, but they were still working. Saren watched in silence as one human tightened a seal with trembling fingers, then leaned back against the wall, breathing hard before standing again. "Why don't you stop?" she asked gently. The human looked up, surprised. "If we stop, the station fails. But your bodies." He smiled weakly. "They'll hold, they usually do." Saren felt something shift inside her. This was not survival under attack. This was endurance under responsibility. Coalition medics wanted to pull the humans out. Elias stopped them. "Give us time," he said. "We can finish this." Saren looked at him sharply. "You should not have to prove this again." Elias met her gaze. "We're not proving anything, we're just helping." Hours passed. Together, humans and non-humans worked side by side. Where others collapsed from strain, humans took over, compensating, adapting, finding ways to reduce impact on the more vulnerable species. No speeches, no heroics, just work. When the anomaly finally drifted away and the station stabilized, the silence that followed felt heavier than the crisis itself. The station leader approached Elias and Saren later, eyes full of something close to awe. "They stayed conscious when our strongest fell," they said. "They carried others while barely standing themselves." Elias rubbed his sore shoulders. "That's not strength, that's practice." News of the incident spread, this time not as a trial, not as conflict, as quiet proof. Humans were not defined by what they could survive alone, but by what they could endure for others. The narrative shifted again. On the return journey, Saren stood with Elias in the observation corridor. She seemed thoughtful, her usual certainty softened. My people believed endurance was personal, she said. A test of worth, you have shown me it can be shared. Elias smiled faintly. Pain's lighter when you're not carrying it alone. She considered that. The coalition soon expanded joint missions. Humans were requested for environments others avoided. Not because humans were expendable, but because they could remain functional when conditions were imperfect. Humans became stabilizers, anchors in chaos, not rulers, not weapons. Then came the message that changed everything. A distant system, far beyond coalition space, sent a transmission barely holding together. A civilization on the edge of collapse, facing environmental failure. Their message was not a call for help. It was a warning. Do not come, it said. This place breaks everyone. The council debated for cycles. Sending aid could mean losing ships, losing lives. Elias stood before them once more. We should go, he said. Why? One counselor asked. You have nothing to gain. Elias answered honestly. Neither do they. Saren stood with him, placing her hand over her chest in the formal gesture of her people. If humans go, she said, Kael'thran will stand with them. The mission was approved. The journey was harsh, space warped, systems failed, crews struggled, humans adapted. They slept in shifts, adjusted routines, took on tasks others could not because they were immune, but because they could keep moving while uncomfortable. When they arrived, the world below was damaged but alive. The people were afraid, worn thin by survival. Humans did not arrive as saviors. They arrived as helpers. They listened, learned, worked. They stayed. Months later, when the system stabilized, the civilization sent a new message into the galaxy. We were told you endure, it said. We did not understand, now we do. Elias stood on a ridge overlooking the repaired settlement, wind pulling at his clothes. Saren stood beside him, her presence steady. The stars don't feel as cold anymore, she said. Elias looked out at the sky. They never were, we just didn't know how to stand in them yet. Far across the galaxy, humanity's place became clearer. Not above others, not beneath, but beside. A species shaped by endurance, choosing connection over dominance and proving that survival, when shared, could change everything. And the universe, vast and uncertain, finally made room for them.